for round 4 and another set of deaths that need to be ranked. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the brutal to most brutal death battle deaths of seasons 1 through 3. Now if you've already seen those, then you know how this works. I consider confirmed deaths only, and any deaths that happen throughout a fight may be counted. And this is a ranking of the brutality of the deaths only, so it does not reflect my views on whether or not I agree with the results. And so with that, we get into the brutal to most brutal deaths of Season 4. Taking the lowest spot is the death of Metal Sonic, which much like the Terminator death, lands at the very bottom due to being an unfeeling robot as opposed to a sentient being. I know some may argue that that shouldn't really matter, but when compared to some of the other deaths on here, you can start to see why it would lose points in that category. Having failed to stop Zero in time, he sliced straight through Metal Overlord, cutting him in half as he blows up. It could be argued that Metal Sonic may have a little more sentience to him than Terminator does, considering that he broke his programming somewhat to want to take over the world himself. But even so, the death happened so quickly that I find it hard to put this any higher on the list. The Foot Soldiers get a quick mention because their death was just that, quick. Silver Samurai slices right through all of them. Not much else to say. Our next spot is actually a group ranking, and although there are 5 of them, it's the Megazord that takes a majority of the damage right up to the initial death. And although Voltron seemingly loses a member, other than their reactions there's really no confirmation of them dying or just being seriously injured, so I will not be counting that. And as for the Power Rangers death, like I said, the Megazord is the one who takes the brunt of the attack. It wasn't until Voltron got their sword back that they were able to slice through Megazord, blowing it up, along with the Power Rangers, making for a very quick death. You could make an argument that the referee in this fight was actually just knocked out, but this was Balrog. Do you really think he'd let him live? And it only took him about 3 punches to finish off the ref. So it may not have been that brutal of a beating, but still worth mentioning. The next death comes after a pretty epic fight, but still not really much to say about this one. This is a disintegration death, in which Ichigo yells out "damn it" as he's being hit with the Jinchuriki bomb. It may be worth noting that Ichigo was also in his base form when this happened, but compared to the other deaths that will be coming up, it still lands 14th on this list. Now this next death I feel was a little bit more of a hollow victory. Nathan made his attempt to escape using Laura's helicopter, but she did manage to throw one of her climbing hooks, blowing it up. Now Nathan did survive the explosion. He survived the fall. What it was the helicopter blades that seemed to have honed in specifically on Nathan and impaling him. This death was brutal all the same, but it was definitely the helicopter that actually won. We have another one of those "yes, this existed" fights. From the start, it probably wasn't the most fair to put a dog against a bear, especially one that can grow to the size of a mountain and brutally crush the dog while in his car. Just be sure to remember him, kids. Sitting just outside the top 10, we have the death of Bane, who may have thought that he had the upper hand, until at least this happens. After which Bane is slammed against a wall and his head popped. Of course, it's the way the symbiote was used to accomplish this that gives Bane's death this ranking. In at number 10, we have the battle between two returning Death Battle combatants. Of course, it is embarrassing to be made to hit yourself with your own weapon. Of course, the real brutality comes from Thor being stabbed and just how it was done. If this was more like an ordinary stabbing, it probably would not have made it up so high. Captain Marvel's death is next, and first off, does anyone remember when Android 18 did this to Vegeta? Well, Captain Marvel gets a lot of that same punishment. Having to have broken a few of her bones before slamming her into the ground, there's only one reason as to why this doesn't rank any higher. As painful as that may have been, the initial death was a quick crushing of Carol Danvers' head. Now, in most cases, being blown up happens so quickly that it usually doesn't rank this high, but this is a bit of a different case. Now, if you're the Spot, having a hole in your stomach isn't really a big deal. But for Miguel O'Hara, after being beaten senseless, having 3 bombs blow out a huge piece of his stomach and chest isn't the most pleasant way to die. Coming in at number 7 is Glacius, but you would expect that a death against a Mortal Kombat character would be brutal. Breaking through Glacius's ice shield, Sub-Zero uses his signature, taking their head off with the spine intact. It's a quick death, yes, but just the gruesome image itself can remind you of how brutal Sub-Zero can be as a character. There's not a whole lot that can kill Virgil, but Sephiroth did manage to do quite a bit of damage to him with his supernova. What puts this just outside the top 5 is that even Virgil's instantaneous healing unable to keep up with the damage done, then being stabbed, lifted, and sliced in half. When they talk about karma coming back to bite, it really hit Bullrog 100-fold after what he did to the referee. Like with the Joker vs. Needles, a death doesn't necessarily have to be bloody in order to be brutal. And as his name suggests, TJ's combo punches were just that, brutal. Of course, the flurry of punches wasn't enough for him, so the beheading by uppercut is what truly places this in 5th. Rinneman's death follows along sort of the same as Virgil's death. And while getting hit with a supernova may seem worse than being beat with a bone staff, it's the end of these deaths that actually separate them. Because while Virgil was stabbed from behind, Rinneman got stabbed in the throat. And to make matters worse, she struggles as she slides down on the weapon before getting beheaded. And while she may have died before the finishing blow, being stabbed in the throat and struggling to breathe is definitely worse than being stabbed in the back. Now these top 3 got a little harder to place, because any one of them would seem top spot worthy. For Ace, he may have been able to turn himself into fire, but that wasn't going to be able to save him from the brutal death that Natsu gives him. So all Natsu needed was to get in close to deliver a supercharged attack, one that was able to peel off Ace's skin before completely disintegrating him. So this season had 2 battles that were one of those yes, it exists type of battles. And you wouldn't think that a duck would be able to win against a knight, but you'd be wrong. After stopping Shovel Knight in his tracks, Scrooge was able to pogo stick on his neck 3 times before popping his head off. Of course, to add insult to injury, it was with Shovel Knight's own weapon. Now what puts this in the top spot is not just the death itself, but it seems like Shredder takes his time savoring it a little bit more. Silver Samurai's arm is cut off, and like with Shovel Knight, he's struck with his own weapon. He falls to his knees, his sword still sticking out of his eye, and this is where Shredder just casually walks over to him. And if Silver Samurai wasn't dead after being beheaded, he definitely was after his head was crushed. With this kind of overkill, and the length of time of the initial death, I feel that this belongs in the top spot. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments section if you agree, or what death you think it was the most brutal. And also be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to keep gaming.